In this video, we're going to conclude our basic merger model by finishing with the last required step here, which is to calculate the accretion dilution. In other words, how much our combined company's earnings per share differs from the number that we calculated above with Apple's standalone earnings per share right here. The calculation here is very, very simple. All we're going to do is for the earnings per share, we're going to take the 1251 right here, and then subtract whatever the standalone EPS was right here. If you think about this calculation, if our earnings per share has increased, this will be positive. If it's decreased, then this will be negative. So no matter what happens here, we're getting to either the accretion if it's positive or the dilution if it's negative. For the percentage, all we're going to say is we're going to take the 92 cents that you see right here and then divide by the original standalone EPS. Sometimes people make the mistake here of dividing by the new EPS, but you're always looking at the percentage change here. So you're dividing all the time by the old EPS for Apple as a standalone entity here. We see it comes out to around 8%. And now we can take these numbers and just paste them right over here. Paste the formulas anyway. We see that accretion dilution is around 8% in year 1, going to 10% in year 2. So what does this really tell us, and why is this so important when we're doing a model like this? And the answer is that with a merger model, this is the number one thing that you're focused on. How does a company's earnings per share change after they've acquired this other company in year 1, year 2, year 3, and so on and so forth? The reason why it's so important is because investors in the company pay a lot of attention and place a lot of weight on the company's earnings per share, analyst projections, the company's stock price, everything else is based on the company's earnings per share. And if they surpass expectations and they have an earnings per share that is beyond what analysts are projecting, then the company's stock price will receive a boost, the investors will be happy because their investment will be worth more. And so earnings per share is often seen as a very important metric for the company's overall health, how well they're performing, what kind of results they're actually delivering, whether or not they're meeting projections or not. And so when they go and acquire another company, the reason that it's so important to look at this is because if you do a model like this and the accretion dilution comes out to be, say, negative 10%, so there's a 10% dilution, then shareholders are not going to be happy, investors are not going to be happy, and the chances of a deal actually getting done are going to fall dramatically. If, on the other hand, you do a model like this and it turns out that the accretion dilution is actually positive, so you're actually adding to the combined company's EPS, then the investors are going to be very happy, and the resistance to actually getting the deal done will be very minimal if it exists at all. So it's a very important metric to look at, and investors are just not going to be behind such a deal happening if the accretion dilution does not look favorable. That's why whenever a company issues a press release and they're talking about a merger or acquisition, they always say this deal is expected to be accretive in 2010, this deal is expected to be neutral to EPS, it's expected to be dilutive, because they know investors are very, very focused on that metric. And so it's important to give an indication of what they expect the deal will actually result in after the fact. Now the numbers in this case are telling us that from a purely financial perspective, Apple buying RIM at the $75 per share actually makes sense, and hypothetically it's a deal that investors might actually approve of because the EPS is above a certain threshold. It's around 10% positive here, which is a very good sign with mergers and acquisitions like this. Of course, it's not really the full story because we're just looking at one scenario here under one set of assumptions. The fact is that similar to what we saw in the DCF analysis, there are many different assumptions that go into a merger model. And so with a DCF, we completed sensitivity tables to look at the impact of those different assumptions. With a merger model, we're going to do a very similar thing, and we're going to take a similar approach and look at sensitivity tables to show what may happen under different scenarios. Beyond just that, though, there are a lot of other simplifications that we made in this current version of the model. And so what we're going to do next is start getting into some of the added details that are necessary in a merger model, some of the additions you can make, and some of the more complex items and more complex accounting treatment that you need to look at when you're looking at things like combining the company's balance sheets, for example, when you're looking at a concept known as revenue and expense synergies, and when you're looking at a couple other more advanced topics. So coming up next, we're going to take the basic concept and the basic model that we've created right here for Apple buying research in motion, and we're going to extend it by looking at some of those more advanced topics and going into detail on how you set them up, how you treat them accounting wise, and how you factor in everything into this model right here.